The scent of antiseptic clung to the air like something artificial, too clean, too controlled. Adrian Wolfe hated hospitals. They reminded him of weakness, of things he couldn't dominate. Adrian, I swear something is wrong. Chloe Bennet whined, pressing a manicured hand against her stomach. It burns. Like, really burns. Adrian didn't look up from his phone. You had champagne for breakfast, he said flatly. Your body is protesting. Chloe pouted, snapping a selfie anyway. You're so insensitive. He barely heard her. His attention was locked on a $300 million deal flashing across his screen. Until, move, move, now. The double doors burst open. A gurney rushed past. Fast, urgent, violent. Adrian glanced up, annoyed at the interruption. Then, froze. Everything inside him stopped. No pulse stability, she's crashing, prep L and D now. A woman lay on the gurney, pale, drenched in sweat, her hands gripping her swollen stomach like she was fighting to hold herself together. And her face, Adrian's phone slipped from his hand. It hit the floor without a sound. Isabella? His voice didn't feel like his own. Chloe blinked. What? But Adrian wasn't listening. He couldn't breathe, couldn't move. Because the woman being rushed past him, the woman he hadn't seen in 8 months, was his ex-wife. And she was very, very pregnant. Adrian. Chloe's voice cut through, irritated now. Who is that? He didn't answer. His mind was racing. Pregnant? No, that wasn't possible. The divorce had been finalized 8 months ago. But the separation. His chest tightened. There had been that night. One last night. Messy. Drunk. Desperate. A mistake he buried and never looked back at. Until now. Oh my God. Chloe snapped, grabbing his arm. You look like you've seen a ghost. He swallowed hard. I might have. The doors slammed shut behind the gurney. Gone. Just like that. But the image stayed burned into his mind. Her face. Her pain. Her hands clutching her stomach like she was fighting for something. Or someone. Adrian, my appointment is in 5 minutes. Chloe said sharply. Are you coming or not? He turned to look at her. Really look at her. Perfect hair. Perfect makeup. Perfect, uncomplicated life. Everything he told himself he wanted. And suddenly, it all felt shallow. I can't, he said. Chloe blinked. Excuse me, I can't go in. Her expression darkened. You promised you'd be there. I need to make a call. Oh my God, she scoffed. Seriously? You're ditching me? For what? Her. He didn't answer. That was answer enough. Chloe stepped back, eyes narrowing. Who is she? Adrian. He hesitated. Just for a second. No one. A lie. A weak one. And Chloe knew it. Fine, she snapped. Do whatever you want. Her heels clicked sharply as she stormed off. Adrian didn't watch her go. He was already moving. Toward the elevators. Toward the one place he had no control. The maternity floor felt like a different world. Quiet. Heavy. Every sound, every heartbeat monitor, every hushed voice, pressed against him. For the first time in years, Adrian Wolfe felt small. He approached the nurse's station. I'm looking for a patient, he said. Isabella Hart. She was just brought in. Emergency. The nurse typed quickly. Then paused. I'm sorry, sir. I can't release that information. She was just here, he insisted. I saw her. Are you family? The question hit harder than expected. He hesitated. I was. That's not the same, she replied calmly. His jaw tightened. I'm the father of her child. The words felt foreign, heavy, real. The nurse's expression didn't change. Unless you are listed as an emergency contact, you'll need to wait. Wait. Adrian Wolfe didn't wait. He made things happen. Closed deals. Controlled outcomes. But now, he was just a man sitting in a quiet room, listening to the echo of his own mistakes. He dropped into a chair, ran a hand through his hair. This wasn't supposed to happen. The divorce had been clean, strategic, necessary. That's what he told himself. She stopped growing, he had said once. She became comfortable. But now, the image of her fighting on that gurney shattered every justification he had built. That wasn't comfort. That was survival. His phone buzzed. His lawyer. Adrian answered immediately. Marcus, I think I have a problem. A pause. When don't you? Adrian exhaled slowly. My ex-wife is in the hospital. So? She's pregnant. Silence. Then. Is it yours? Adrian closed his eyes. It might be. Another pause. Longer this time, then Marcus spoke, cold, precise. Then your life just became very complicated. Adrian leaned forward, elbows on his knees, his empire, his reputation. His future. Everything suddenly felt fragile. What do I do? Nothing, Marcus said. You wait. You say nothing. You admit nothing until paternity is confirmed. Adrian stared at the floor. Wait. Do nothing. That wasn't who he was. But for the first time, he didn't know who he was anymore. Somewhere beyond those walls, Isabella was fighting for her life, and possibly, his child's. Adrian sat there, motionless, as the truth settled in like a slow, crushing weight. He hadn't just left his wife. He had walked away from something far more permanent, something he couldn't undo. And now, it was too late to pretend it didn't exist. Adrian did not remember standing up, but somehow he was already moving again, pacing the length of the waiting area like a man searching for something he could not name. The walls felt too close, the silence too loud. Every second stretched, thick and suffocating. He checked his watch. 2 minutes had passed. It felt like an hour. A nurse walked by, and he stepped forward immediately. "Excuse me," he said, his voice tight. "The patient who was brought in earlier. Isabella Hart. I need to know what is happening." The nurse paused, offering him a polite but distant smile. "Sir, I understand your concern, but I cannot share any information unless you are listed as family or authorized by the patient." "I told the last nurse," Adrian said, struggling to keep his tone controlled. "I am the father of her child." Her expression softened, but only slightly. "That may be the case, but legally that does not grant you access unless it is documented." "Legally." The word landed like a blade. Adrian ran a hand through his hair, frustration tightening his chest. "Then, who can authorize it?" "The patient herself, once she is stable." "Stable," he swallowed hard. "And if she is not?" The nurse hesitated, just for a fraction of a second. "Then the medical team will proceed as necessary." "Proceed? Without him?" The realization hit deeper than he expected. He nodded stiffly, stepping back, dismissed without ceremony. For the first time in years, Adrian Wolfe had no leverage. No influence. No control. Just a last name that meant nothing here. He returned to the waiting room, but sitting felt impossible. His body refused stillness, his mind refused silence. He pulled out his phone again, staring at the black screen for a moment before dialing. Marcus answered on the second ring. "Tell me you left the hospital," his lawyer said immediately. Adrian let out a dry laugh. "Not happening." A pause. "That is not advisable. Neither is finding out you might have a child in a hallway." Marcus exhaled. "Then listen carefully. You are in a volatile position. If that child is yours, everything changes. Your estate structure, your public image, your pending merger with Halston Group. All of it." Adrian leaned against the wall, eyes fixed on nothing. "I do not care about the merger, right now." "You should," Marcus replied sharply. "Because the moment this becomes public, it will not just be a personal issue. It becomes a corporate risk." Adrian closed his eyes. Corporate risk. That was how his life was measured. People reduced to variables, emotions translated into liabilities. "She could have died," Adrian said quietly. Marcus did not respond right away. When he spoke again, his tone had shifted, just slightly. "Do you know that for certain?" "I saw her," Adrian said. "She was not just in labor, something was wrong." "Then, the best thing you can do is wait for confirmation. Do not assume anything. Do not act emotionally." Adrian let out a breath that felt like it scraped his lungs on the way out. "Too late for that." "Adrian," Marcus said, slower now, more deliberate, "if you involve yourself without legal clarity, you expose yourself to obligations you cannot control." Adrian opened his eyes. Obligations. The word echoed in his head. It sounded so clinical, so detached. But all he could see was Isabella's face, pale and strained, her body curled protectively around the life inside her. "That is my child," he said. "You do not know that. I know enough." Silence stretched between them. Then Marcus spoke again, softer but firmer. "You built your life on precision, Adrian. Do not throw that away now." Adrian's grip tightened around the phone. "I already did," he said, and ended the call. He sank into one of the chairs, finally unable to keep moving. The exhaustion hit him all at once. Not physical, something deeper, something heavier. His mind drifted, uninvited, back to the last day he had seen her. The kitchen had smelled like fresh flowers. Isabella always kept flowers in the house. Said it made things feel alive. He had stood near the island, his jacket still on, briefcase in hand. Already halfway out the door. "I am not happy," he had said. Just like that. No warning, no build-up. Just a statement. Isabella had not turned around immediately. She had been trimming the stems of white lilies, her movements careful, precise. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice calm but distant. "This," Adrian said, gesturing vaguely around the room. "Us. It is not working." Now, she turned. Slowly. Her eyes searched his face, as if looking for something that was no longer there. "Since when?" He shrugged. "A while." Her lips parted slightly. "And you are telling me now?" "I did not think dragging it out would help." A flicker of something crossed her expression, not anger, not yet. Something quieter, more dangerous. "I have been trying, Adrian," she said. "Do you even see that?" He exhaled, already impatient. "That is exactly the problem. It feels forced. Routine. Predictable." "And that is a bad thing?" she asked. "It is not enough," he replied. Silence filled the space between them. Heavy. Uncomfortable. Real. Isabella set the flowers down carefully, wiping her hands on a towel. What do you want? She asked. A divorce. The word landed hard. He had expected resistance. Emotion, something. But Isabella just stood there, staring at him. And then, slowly, she nodded. If that is what you want, she said quietly. That was it. No tears. No pleading. No scene. Just acceptance. And somehow, that had unsettled him more than anything else. You are not going to fight me on this? He had asked. She met his gaze, her eyes steady. No, she said. Because I do not want to be with someone who has already left. Adrian pressed his fingers against his temples, the memory cutting deeper now than it had then. He had walked out of that house feeling justified, certain, free. He had told himself it was the right decision. That he deserved more. That she had become part of a life that no longer fit him. But now he saw it differently. She had not stopped fighting. He had. A sharp cry echoed faintly down the hallway. Adrian's head snapped up. It was distant, brief, but unmistakable. A newborn. His chest tightened. Was that? No. He stood abruptly, heart pounding. Another nurse passed by, and he stepped into her path. That was a baby, he said. Was that from Isabella Hart's room? The nurse blinked, startled by his intensity. Sir, I cannot disclose. Just tell me if she is alive, he interrupted, his voice breaking for the first time. The nurse hesitated. Then, quietly, she said, you should sit down. His stomach dropped. What does that mean? It means, she said gently, that the doctors are still with her. Still with her. Not finished. Not safe. Adrian staggered back a step, his legs suddenly unsteady. For the first time in his life, there was nothing he could negotiate. Nothing he could buy, nothing he could fix. Just a closed door. And a future he had never planned for, hanging in the balance. He sank back into the chair, staring at the floor. A child he was never meant to know, a life he had already walked away from. And now, possibly the only thing that mattered. Pain came first. Not sharp, not sudden, but deep and crushing. Like something inside Isabella's chest was slowly folding in on itself. Then came the sound. A steady, distant rhythm. Machines. Voices. Someone calling her name. Isabella. Isabella, can you hear me? She tried to open her eyes, but they felt too heavy, as if the weight of the last 9 months had settled behind them. 9 months. The thought flickered weakly through her mind, and suddenly everything rushed back. The test. The doctor. The choice. Her chest tightened, and for a terrifying second, she thought the pain had returned. But then she realized it was something else. Memory. She had been standing alone in her bathroom when she saw the 2 pink lines. The world had gone silent. She remembered gripping the edge of the sink, staring at the reflection of a woman she barely recognized. Her face had looked thinner, tired. But her eyes had filled with something she had not felt in months. Hope. And fear. Both at once. Okay, she had whispered to herself, her voice trembling. Okay. It had not been planned. It had not been convenient, and it had come at the worst possible time. 2 days after the divorce papers were signed, 2 days after Adrian had walked away without looking back. She had sat on the cold bathroom floor for a long time, the test still clutched in her hand. Her first instinct had been to call him, her fingers had even hovered over his name, Adrian. 1 tap. That was all it would take. He would answer. He always answered when it mattered. But would it matter to him? That was the question that stopped her. She could already hear his voice, measured. Controlled. Practical. We will figure this out. Not, we will raise this child. Not, we will face this together. Just, we will manage it. And something inside her had broken at that thought. She did not want to be managed. She did not want to be another responsibility on his endless list of obligations. So she had lowered the phone, and chosen silence. The doctor's office had smelled like disinfectant and something faintly floral. Too clean, too artificial. She sat across from Dr. Eleanor Hayes, her hands resting unconsciously over her still flat stomach. You are about 6 weeks along, the doctor had said gently. Isabella nodded, her heart had been racing, but not from fear. From something deeper, protective. And there is something else we need to discuss, Dr. Hayes continued. That was when everything changed. The words had come slowly, carefully, as if speaking them too quickly might make them worse. Your heart function is significantly reduced. This condition can develop during pregnancy. It is serious. Isabella frowned slightly. Serious, how? The doctor met her eyes directly. Life-threatening. The room had tilted, not dramatically, not in a way that made her faint, just enough to make everything feel unstable, unreal. What does that mean for the baby? She asked immediately. Dr. Hayes paused. It means your body is under extreme strain. Continuing the pregnancy increases the risk to your life. There is also risk to the child if your condition worsens. Isabella swallowed. And my options. The silence that followed told her everything before the doctor even spoke. We need to consider whether continuing the pregnancy is safe. Consider. Such a small word. For something so enormous. Isabella looked down at her hands. at the place where a life had already begun. It was too early to feel anything, too early to show, but she knew. She felt it in a way that had nothing to do with medicine, nothing to do with logic. I am keeping the baby, she said. The doctor inhaled slowly. Isabella, I need you to understand the risks. I do, she replied, her voice steadier now. You could die. The words hung in the air, heavy, unavoidable. Isabella nodded. I know. Then why would you take that chance? Because it was not a chance. Not to her. She lifted her gaze, her eyes clear despite the storm building behind them. Because this is the only thing in my life right now that is not broken. The months that followed were a quiet war. Not loud, not visible, but relentless. Her world shrank to appointments, medications, and long nights filled with uncertainty. She moved into her mother's house without telling anyone why. Told friends she needed time, space, distance from the life she had just left behind. In reality, she was preparing for something much harder. Survival. Every week brought another test. Another measurement, another number that determined whether she was getting stronger or closer to collapse. Your heart is working harder than it should, Dr. Hayes told her during one visit. You need to rest more. I am resting, Isabella replied. But rest did not stop the exhaustion. It did not stop the fear that crept in during the quiet hours of the night. She would lie awake, one hand over her chest, the other over her stomach. Counting. Breaths. Heartbeats. Time. Waiting for something to go wrong. Sometimes it almost did. There were moments when her chest tightened so sharply, she thought it was the end. Moments when she could not catch her breath. Moments when the room spun just enough to make her wonder if she would wake up again. But every time, she held on. For him. She never told Adrian. Not once. Not even when things got worse. Not even when the doctor sat her down one afternoon, her expression more serious than before. Your condition is progressing, Dr. Hayes said. We need to prepare for complications. Isabella nodded quietly. There is still time to reconsider, the doctor added gently. Reconsider. The word felt foreign now. Distant, like something that belonged to another version of her. I am not changing my mind, she said. Dr. Hayes studied her for a long moment. Then we will do everything we can to get you both through this. Both. Isabella held on to that word, clung to it, because it meant she was not alone. Not really. Even when the nights were long. Even when the fear felt overwhelming. She had him. Growing. Fighting. Depending on her. Sometimes, though, Adrian still found his way into her thoughts. Uninvited. Unwanted. She would see his face in her mind. Hear his voice. Remember the way he used to look at her before everything changed. Before ambition replaced affection. Before distance replaced connection. There had been a time when he loved her. She believed that, but it had not been enough. And now she refused to let her child grow up feeling like something that had to be justified, explained, managed, so she stayed silent. Not out of anger, not even out of pride, but out of something stronger. Dignity. The first time she felt the baby move, she had been alone in her bedroom. It was subtle. Just a small flutter. But it was enough to steal her breath. She froze, her hand immediately pressing against her stomach. Hey, she whispered, her voice breaking into a soft laugh. I felt that. Tears filled her eyes, but they were not from fear. Not this time. They were from something warmer. Something real. I have got you, she murmured. No matter what happens, I have got you. And she meant it, even if it cost her everything. The pain came back suddenly. Sharp this time. Violent. Dragging her out of memory and back into the present. Her eyes flew open. White light flooded her vision. Voices surrounded her. Blood pressure dropping. Stay with us, Isabella. Her chest heaved, struggling for air. And through it all, one thought cut through the chaos. Not fear, not regret, but determination. Her hand moved weakly, searching, instinctively reaching for her stomach. For him. I am here, she whispered, though she did not know if the words made it out. I am still here. Somewhere beyond the pain, beyond the noise, beyond the uncertainty, she held onto the one truth that had carried her this far. She had chosen this. She had chosen him. And no matter what happened next, she would not break. The room was dim when Isabella finally became fully aware again. Not the harsh brightness of the operating lights, but a softer, muted glow that made everything feel distant, almost unreal. The steady rhythm of the heart monitor anchored her, each beep a quiet reminder that she was still here. Alive. Barely, but alive. Her throat burned when she tried to swallow. Her body felt heavy, as if every part of her had been wrung out and left empty. But the first thing she noticed was the absence. The weight that had been inside her for months was gone. Her hand moved instinctively, weak but urgent, pressing against her abdomen. Flat. Her breath hitched. Where is he? She whispered, her voice rough and fragile. A chair scraped softly beside her. Her mother leaned forward immediately, gripping her hand. He is okay, sweetheart. He is okay. They took him to observation, just to be safe. Isabella closed her eyes, relief crashing over her so suddenly it almost hurt. He is alive, she asked, barely breathing the words. Margaret nodded, tears shining in her eyes. He is strong, just like you. A broken sound escaped Isabella's lips, something between a laugh and a sob. She had done it. She had made it through. They both had. For a moment, nothing else existed but that truth. Then, he is here. The words cut through the fragile peace like a blade. Isabella's eyes opened slowly. Who? But she already knew. Margaret hesitated, her grip tightening slightly. Adrian. The name settled heavily in the room. Of course he was. Of course the universe would not let this moment belong only to her. A cold, sharp clarity replaced the softness in her expression. How long? She asked. He has been outside for hours. He saw you when they brought you in. Isabella let out a quiet, bitter breath. He did not know, Margaret added carefully. Isabella turned her head slightly, staring at the ceiling. He did not know, she repeated, her tone flat. Then her gaze shifted, hardening, because he never asked. Margaret said nothing. There was nothing to say. A long silence stretched between them before Isabella spoke again, her voice steadier now despite the exhaustion dragging at her. Send him in. Margaret frowned. Are you sure? You are not strong enough for this. A faint, humorless smile touched Isabella's lips. I carried a child with a failing heart for 9 months, she said quietly. I think I can handle a conversation. There was no arguing with that. Margaret hesitated only a moment longer before nodding and standing. I will be right outside. The door opened, then closed again, and for a brief second there was silence. Then the handle turned once more. Adrian stepped inside like a man entering unfamiliar territory. Careful, uncertain. The sight of her hit him harder than anything else had that day. She looked smaller, paler, fragile in a way he had never seen before. But her eyes were the same. Sharp, unyielding, alive. You came, Isabella said, her voice quiet but edged with something colder. Adrian swallowed, taking a step closer before stopping himself. I saw you in the hallway, he said. I did not know. Isabella, why did you not tell me? A faint, hollow sound escaped her. Not quite a laugh. Not quite disbelief. Tell you, she echoed. When exactly was I supposed to do that, Adrian? Between your interviews, or your vacations? That is not fair, he said quickly, tension creeping into his voice. Her eyes flashed. Fair, she repeated, sharper now. You want to talk about fair? She shifted slightly, wincing from the effort but pushing through it. Fair would have been you not walking out on your marriage, like it was a business deal you got bored of. Adrian flinched. I did not know you were pregnant. No, she said, you did not know anything. Because you stopped paying attention, long before you left. Her words landed with brutal precision. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. Because there was nothing he could say that would not sound like an excuse. His gaze shifted, almost involuntarily, toward the empty bassinet in the corner. The baby, he said, his voice quieter now. Is it ours? Isabella followed his gaze briefly before looking back at him. There was no hesitation. No, she said calmly. The word hit like a punch. Adrian blinked, confusion flashing across his face. No. She held his gaze, unflinching. He is not ours, she continued. He is mine. The room seemed to tighten around them. Adrian took a step forward, his composure cracking. You do not get to decide that alone, he said, his voice rising. If that child is mine. He is, she cut in sharply. And that is exactly why I made the decision. Silence fell, heavy and suffocating. Adrian stared at her, something raw and unsettled building beneath his surface. You had no right, he said finally, the words strained. You had no right to keep this from me. Isabella's lips parted slightly, disbelief flickering across her face, before it hardened into something else. Did I not? She asked quietly. Her voice did not rise. It did not need to. I had every right to protect myself, she continued, her tone steady but laced with steel. And I had every right to protect him from being treated like another obligation in your life. That is not what this is, Adrian snapped. Is it not? She shot back immediately. Because from where I am lying, it looks exactly like that. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration bleeding through. This is my child, Isabella. And I almost died bringing him into the world, she replied, her voice cutting through his with quiet fury. Where were you then? The question hung in the air, unanswered, unanswerable. Adrian looked at her, really looked at her, at the exhaustion etched into her features, at the faint tremor in her hand, at the strength it must have taken to survive what he had not even known existed. Something shifted inside him. Something uncomfortable. Something he could not control. I would have been here, he said, his voice lower now, if I had known. Isabella let out a slow breath, her gaze softening for the briefest moment before hardening again. That is exactly why I did not tell you. The words landed harder than anything else she had said. Adrian froze. What? I did not want you here out of obligation, she said, simply. I did not want your help if it came with resentment. His jaw tightened. You do not get to decide how I feel. No, she agreed. But I do get to decide what I accept. Before he could respond, the door burst open. Adrian, what the hell is going on? Chloe's voice sliced through the room like glass. Both of them turned. She stood in the doorway, her expression a mix of confusion, anger, and something dangerously close to panic. Her eyes moved quickly, taking everything in: the hospital bed, Isabella, the machines, the empty bassinet. Then they landed on Adrian. "Who is she?" Chloe demanded. Adrian exhaled sharply. "Chloe, not now." "No," she snapped, stepping inside. "You do not get to say that. I have been looking for you for over an hour. And now I find you in a maternity ward with her." She pointed at Isabella, her hand trembling slightly. "And do not even try to tell me this is nothing." The room tightened again, tension snapping into something volatile. Adrian stepped forward slightly. "I just found out." "Found out what?" Chloe cut him off. Silence. Then Isabella spoke, calm, controlled. "I am his ex-wife," she said. Chloe's gaze snapped to her. "And that," Isabella continued, her voice unwavering, "was the bassinet for his son." The words detonated. Chloe staggered back a step as if physically struck. Her eyes widened as she turned slowly toward Adrian. "His son," she whispered. Adrian opened his mouth, but no words came out. Because there was nothing he could say that would make this better. "You lied to me," Chloe said, her voice shaking now. "All this time, you let me talk about our future, about us, and you had this." "I did not know," Adrian said quickly. "I swear to you, I did not know until today." "Do you think that makes it better?" she demanded, her voice rising. "Do you?" He stepped toward her. "Chloe, just calm down." "Do not tell me to calm down," she snapped, pulling away. Her breathing was uneven now, her composure cracking under the weight of the situation. Then, suddenly, something in her expression shifted, hardened. Her voice dropped, quieter but far more dangerous. "Fine," she said, "then choose." Adrian stilled. "Choose," he repeated. "Yes," Chloe said, her eyes locking onto his. "You walk out of this room with me right now, and we forget this ever happened. Or you stay here." She gestured toward Isabella, toward the entire situation with visible disgust. "With your past, with your mistake." The word hung in the air. Mistake. Isabella's expression did not change, but something in her eyes went cold. Adrian looked between them, between the life he had built, and the one he had abandoned. For the first time, he hesitated. And that hesitation said everything. Chloe let out a short, bitter laugh. "I see," she said quietly. She reached up, unclasping the bracelet he had given her just weeks ago, and dropped it onto the floor between them. "Have a nice life, Adrian." Then she turned and walked out. This time, he did not stop her. The silence that followed was heavier than before. Adrian stood there, the weight of everything pressing down on him from all sides. He had just lost something, but he was not even sure what it was. Because everything felt like it was slipping away at once. Slowly, he turned back to Isabella. She looked exhausted. Drained. But her gaze was steady. Unmoved. "You should go," she said quietly. Adrian hesitated. "I have the right to see my son." Her expression hardened. "You lost the right to demand anything from me a long time ago." The words were final, absolute. And for the first time, Adrian had no argument left. He stood there for a moment longer, then turned, and walked out, leaving behind the one thing in his life he could not control, and the woman who had learned how to survive without him. Adrian did not remember how long he stood in the hallway after the door closed behind him. Time seemed to dissolve into something shapeless, stretched thin between the echo of Chloe's footsteps fading away and the weight of Isabella's final words still pressing against his chest. "You lost the right." The sentence repeated in his mind, quieter each time, but no less sharp. He had built his life on control, on certainty, on the belief that every decision he made was rational, justified, necessary. And yet, standing there in a hospital corridor that smelled faintly of antiseptic and something far more fragile, he felt none of that certainty. Only something hollow, something unfamiliar, something dangerously close to shame. "Adrian." The voice came from behind him. He turned slowly. Margaret stood a few steps away, her expression composed, but her eyes unreadable. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Adrian straightened slightly, instinctively reaching for the version of himself he understood. "I think we should talk," he said. Margaret studied him for a long second before nodding. "Yes," she replied quietly. "I think it is long overdue." They moved to a quieter corner of the corridor, away from the passing nurses and distant murmurs of other families living through their own quiet catastrophes. Adrian exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair. "I need to understand," he said. "Everything." Margaret did not respond immediately. Instead, she looked at him the way one might look at something once familiar that had become unrecognizable. "You want the truth?" she asked. "Yes." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "Then you should prepare yourself," she said softly, "because it will not make you feel better." Adrian said nothing. He was not sure anything could. Margaret drew in a slow breath before beginning. "She found out she was pregnant 2 weeks after you left." The words landed quietly, but their impact was anything but. Adrian's jaw tightened. "I did not know," he said automatically. "I know," Margaret replied. "That is the problem. He frowned slightly, confusion flickering across his face. She tried to call you, Margaret continued, 3 times. Adrian's head snapped up. What? You were in Paris, she said. With Chloe. The memory surfaced instantly, a rooftop dinner. Laughter. A phone vibrating briefly on the table before he silenced it without checking. Something insignificant, something forgettable. Or at least, it had been. Until now. I thought it was work, he said, his voice quieter. Margaret did not soften. She left a message, she added. You never called back. A cold weight settled in his chest. I must have missed it. No, Margaret said gently but firmly, you chose not to see it. Silence followed, heavy, unforgiving. Adrian looked away, his gaze unfocused. She realized then, Margaret continued, that she was already alone. He swallowed hard. That is not true, he said, though there was no conviction behind it. Margaret's eyes sharpened slightly. Is it not? She asked. Because from where I stood, she went to every appointment alone. She heard her baby's heartbeat for the first time alone. She sat in waiting rooms surrounded by couples, while pretending she was not waiting for someone who was never coming. Each word stripped something away from him, layer by layer. Excuse by excuse. I would have been there, he said again, but the sentence sounded weaker this time. Almost hollow. Margaret shook her head slowly. No, she said. You would have come after. After it was convenient. After it fit into your schedule. And she knew that. Adrian flinched. Because a part of him recognized the truth in that. A part he did not want to face. She did not want to beg for your attention, Margaret continued. Not anymore. The corridor felt colder, quieter, as if the world itself had stepped back to let the truth unfold uninterrupted. Adrian exhaled slowly, his chest tightening. And the heart condition, he asked. When did that happen? Margaret's expression changed then, something deeper, something heavier. Month 5, she said. Adrian's breath caught. She collapsed at home. I found her on the kitchen floor. His mind struggled to process the image. Isabella. Alone. On the floor. And him. Somewhere else. Living a life untouched by any of it. They diagnosed her with heart failure, Margaret continued, her voice steady but quieter now. The pregnancy was putting too much strain on her body. Adrian stared at her. That is serious. Margaret let out a short, humorless breath. Yes, she said, it is life-threatening. The words echoed. Life-threatening. His pulse quickened. Why was I not told? He demanded, though the question already felt fragile. Margaret held his gaze. Because she made me promise not to tell you. The answer struck deeper than any accusation. She was afraid, Margaret added. Afraid of what? Adrian asked. Afraid that if you came back, she said slowly, it would not be because you loved her, it would be because you felt responsible. Adrian opened his mouth, then stopped. Because he could not deny it. Not completely. And she did not want that, Margaret said, she did not want to be your obligation. The word hit him again. Obligation. That was how Isabella had seen it, that was how she had believed he would see her. A burden. A duty. Something to manage rather than something to love. His chest tightened painfully. She went through treatments, Margaret continued, medication, bed rest, endless monitoring. Every day was a risk. Adrian felt something crack inside him, and she still kept the baby. He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Margaret's eyes softened, but there was pride in them now. She never considered any other option, she said. Not once. He closed his eyes briefly. Of course she had not. That was who Isabella was. Strong. Stubborn. Unwilling to let go of something she loved. Even if it destroyed her. She said, Margaret went on, her voice quieter still, that if she did not survive, at least a part of her would. The words landed like a blow. Adrian's eyes opened again, but they looked different now. Unsteady. Stop, he said under his breath. But Margaret did not. Because she was not finished. Do you know what she was doing this morning before everything happened? She asked. He shook his head slowly. She was folding baby clothes, Margaret said. By herself. Sitting on the floor because standing made her dizzy. The image formed in his mind with brutal clarity. And this time, he could not push it away. She was preparing for a future she was not even sure she would live to see, Margaret added. Something inside him finally broke. Not loudly, not dramatically, but completely. I did this, he said, the words escaping before he could stop them. Margaret did not argue, because there was nothing to argue. I left, he continued, his voice rough now. I walked away and I did not look back. No, Margaret said quietly. You did worse than that. He looked at her. Confusion, fear. What could be worse than that? She held his gaze. You made her believe she was not worth coming back for. The sentence cut deeper than anything else. Because it was not about what he had done. It was about what she had felt. And feelings could not be undone. Adrian's composure collapsed under the weight of it. He leaned back against the wall, running both hands through his hair as if trying to escape his own thoughts. This is not who I am, he said, almost to himself. But even as he said it, it sounded uncertain. Margaret watched him carefully. Then, who are you? She asked. The question lingered. Unanswered, because for the first time in a long time, Adrian did not know. He had always believed himself to be a good man, a rational man, a man who made difficult choices for the right reasons. But standing there now, surrounded by the consequences of those choices, that version of himself felt like a lie he had told for too long. I thought I was doing the right thing, he said weakly. The marriage was not working. We were unhappy. Margaret nodded slightly. Perhaps, she said, but leaving is not the same as abandoning. The distinction settled heavily between them. Adrian looked down at his hands, empty. For the first time, they felt that way. I do not even know how to fix this, he admitted. Margaret's expression softened just a fraction. You might not be able to, she said honestly. He flinched. Then what am I supposed to do? She studied him for a long moment before answering. You start by understanding that this is not about you, she said, not your guilt, not your regret, not your need to feel like a good man again. Her voice was calm, but every word carried weight. This is about her, she continued, and the life she chose to protect without you. Adrian swallowed hard. And if she never forgives me? Margaret's gaze did not waver. Then you learn to live with that. Silence fell once more. But this time, it was different, heavier, final, because there were no more illusions left to hold onto, only truth, and the unbearable cost of realizing it too late. The silence that followed Adrian out of the hospital did not feel like relief. It followed him home. It sat with him in the car, pressed against the windows, filled the empty space beside him where his phone lay untouched. The city moved as it always did, indifferent, alive, but he felt strangely detached from it, as if he had stepped out of his own life and could no longer find the way back in. By the time he reached his apartment, night had already begun to settle. He stood in the doorway longer than necessary before stepping inside. Everything was exactly as he had left it. Immaculate, ordered, cold. For the first time, it did not feel like success, it felt like absence. He loosened his tie, letting it fall carelessly onto the couch. His jacket followed. The small, controlled habits that once defined him seemed meaningless now, like rituals performed for a version of himself that no longer existed. His phone buzzed. Once. Then again. And again. He glanced at it, expecting nothing that mattered. He was wrong. 17 missed calls, 8 messages. All from the same number. Daniel. Adrian frowned slightly, picking up the phone and scrolling through the messages. We need to talk. Call me immediately. This cannot wait. Adrian exhaled slowly and pressed call. It rang once before being answered. Where the hell have you been? Daniel's voice came through sharp, strained. At the hospital, Adrian replied flatly. There was a brief pause. What? It does not matter, Adrian said. What is going on? Another pause, longer this time, as if Daniel was recalibrating. Then his tone shifted, becoming something heavier. We have a problem. Adrian let out a humorless breath. Be more specific. Our primary investors are pulling out. The words should have hit harder. They did not. Perhaps because Adrian had already been hit by something far worse. Why? He asked, his voice almost detached. Because of you. Daniel said bluntly, or more specifically, because of what they think they know about you. Adrian's eyes narrowed slightly. Explain. There are rumors, Daniel continued. About your personal life, about instability, about recklessness. A bitter edge crept into Adrian's expression. Since when do investors care about rumors? Since those rumors start affecting confidence, Daniel snapped. You are the face of this company, Adrian. If they think you are distracted, compromised, or about to implode, they will protect their money. Adrian ran a hand over his face, exhaustion creeping in. This is ridiculous. No, Daniel said quietly. It is predictable. The word lingered. Predictable. As of this afternoon, Daniel went on, 2 major backers have officially withdrawn. The others are hesitating. Adrian felt something shift then. Not panic. Not yet. But awareness. The first cracks. How much damage are we talking about? He asked. Daniel hesitated. Enough to trigger a chain reaction if we do not stabilize things quickly. Silence stretched between them. Adrian walked slowly toward the window, staring out at the city lights below. This was his world. The one he understood. The one he had built. Or thought he had built. I will handle it, he said finally. Daniel let out a breath that sounded more like doubt than relief. You need to show up tomorrow, he said. In person. No delays. No excuses. I said, I will handle it. Adrian, Daniel's voice hardened. This is not just another problem you can solve with a meeting and a speech. People are watching you. Closely. Adrian's grip on the phone tightened slightly, then they will see exactly what they expect to see, he said. Confidence. Control. Authority. Even if it was the last thing he truly felt, the next morning, the office felt different. Subtly, but undeniably. Conversations lowered when he walked past. Eyes lingered a second too long. Respect had not vanished, but something else had taken its place alongside it. Doubt. Adrian ignored it. He had spent years mastering the art of composure, he would not lose it now. The boardroom was already full when he entered. Daniel sat at the far end of the table, his expression tight. Others followed suit. Polite nods, measured greetings, no warmth. Adrian took his seat at the head of the table, placing his folder down with controlled precision. "Let us begin," he said. The meeting started as they always did. Numbers, reports, projections. But the tension beneath it all was impossible to ignore. Finally, one of the investors leaned forward, a man who had once been firmly in Adrian's corner. "Before we proceed," he said, carefully, "there are concerns that need to be addressed." Adrian met his gaze without hesitation. "Then, address them." A brief pause, then, "There are questions about your current stability," the man said, "both personally and professionally." The room went still. Adrian's expression did not change. "My personal life does not affect my ability to run this company," he said evenly. "Ordinarily, I would agree," the investor replied. "But these are not ordinary circumstances." A second voice joined in. "We have heard about the situation at the hospital yesterday." Adrian's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Information traveled fast, faster than it should have. "And about your relationship complications," another added. Adrian exhaled slowly. Every instinct in him told him to shut this down, to reassert control, to remind them who they were dealing with, but something inside him, something fractured, held him back. "What exactly are you implying?" he asked. "That your judgment may be compromised," the first investor said. "And that puts all of us at risk." There it was. The real fear. Money, security, control. Adrian leaned back slightly, studying them. Men who trusted him, men who followed him, men who were now quietly preparing to walk away. "I built this company from nothing," he said, his voice calm but carrying weight. "Every risk you are afraid of, I have already taken. Every uncertainty you are questioning, I have already overcome." A pause. "But this is different," Daniel said quietly. Adrian's gaze snapped to him. Daniel held it, unflinching. "This is not about strategy," he continued. "This is about you." Silence. For the first time, Adrian had no immediate response. Because Daniel was right, and they all knew it. The illusion of invincibility he had carefully constructed over the years was beginning to crack. And once cracks appeared, they spread. By the end of the meeting, nothing had been resolved. No one said it outright, but the message was clear. Confidence was slipping, and once that happened, it was almost impossible to regain. That evening, Adrian returned to an apartment that felt even emptier than before. He loosened his tie again, slower this time, more deliberate, as if even that small act required effort. His phone buzzed once more, a message. From Chloe. For a brief moment, something flickered inside him. Hope. Or perhaps, just habit. He opened it. "I am done, Adrian. Do not contact me again." He stared at the words. Simple. Final. No anger, no drama, just absence. He let out a slow breath, lowering the phone. And then, for the first time in years, he laughed. But there was no humor in it, only realization. He had lost her, not because of Isabella, not because of the child, but because of who he had become. Or perhaps, who he had always been. The days that followed moved quickly, too quickly, calls, meetings, damage control. But for every step forward, something else slipped. Another investor hesitated, another partner delayed, another piece of his carefully constructed empire began to shift out of place. He worked harder. Longer. Relentlessly. But the foundation itself had been shaken, and no amount of effort could hide that. Because the truth was no longer external, it was internal. Doubt, not just from others, but from himself. One night, long after the office had emptied, Adrian sat alone in the boardroom. The city lights reflected faintly against the glass walls, casting distorted shadows around him. This had once been his kingdom. Every decision made here had shaped something larger than himself. He had been certain, decisive, untouchable. Now, he was none of those things. Margaret's words echoed in his mind. You made her believe she was not worth coming back for. He closed his eyes briefly. And for the first time, he allowed himself to feel it fully. The weight, the guilt, the undeniable truth that no matter how much he tried to fix what was breaking around him, the most important thing had already been broken. And it was something no amount of power, money, or control could rebuild. When he opened his eyes again, the room felt different. Not like a throne, but like a reminder. That even kings could fall. And sometimes, they deserved to. The first thing Adrian learned was that silence could be heavier than rejection. No calls came from Isabella. No messages. No questions. Nothing. At first, he told himself it was expected. She had every reason to shut him out. He had given her nothing to hold on to. No reason to believe he deserved even a fragment of her attention now. Still, the absence pressed on him in ways he had not anticipated. Because there was no argument to fight, no anger to respond to, no door to knock on. Only distance. And the quiet understanding that this time, he would not be the one deciding when it closed. So he stopped trying to reach her directly. Instead, he began with something smaller. Something she could refuse without ever having to face him. The hospital bills were the first thing. He did not announce it, did not attach his name. He simply made a call, spoke to the administration, and settled everything in full. Every procedure, every treatment, every complication. When the woman on the phone asked for confirmation details, he paused for only a second before giving them. Not as a gesture of control, not as a way to claim responsibility, but because for the first time, he understood that responsibility was not something you declared. It was something you carried. Quietly. Margaret noticed, of course. She was not a woman who missed details. When she saw the updated balance, when she traced it back to its source, she said nothing to Isabella at first. She simply watched, waited. And when Isabella eventually found out, it was not through words, but through absence. No more bills. No more quiet stress hidden behind practical conversations. Just one less burden. Isabella stared at the statement longer than necessary, her fingers tightening slightly around the paper. He paid it, she said finally. Margaret did not pretend otherwise. Yes. A long silence followed. Isabella did not look angry, she did not look relieved either, just still. I did not ask him to, she said. I know. Another pause. Then Isabella folded the paper carefully and set it aside.
I will not thank him, she added, her voice calm but firm. Margaret nodded. I did not expect you to. Because gratitude was not the same as forgiveness. And Isabella owed him neither. Adrian did not stop there. But he was careful. Deliberate. He did not try to insert himself into their lives. Did not show up unannounced. Did not demand updates. Instead, he asked Margaret one question. What does she need? At first, Margaret did not answer. She studied him the same way she had in the hospital corridor, searching for something beneath the surface. What she needs, Margaret said slowly, is peace. Adrian absorbed that. And for once, he did not try to argue. The next time Isabella went in for a follow-up appointment, the waiting room was different. Quieter. Not because of the number of people, but because of the way things had been arranged. Her name had been moved. Priority access. Less waiting. Less strain. She noticed immediately.
This was not like this before, she said to the nurse. The nurse smiled politely. We have updated your file. Isabella held her gaze for a moment longer than necessary, then nodded. She did not ask more, because she already knew. At night, when the baby finally slept and the world slowed down just enough to let her think, Isabella found herself staring at the ceiling more often than she wanted to admit. Not thinking about Adrian, not directly, but about the quiet shifts around her, the absence of pressure, the invisible adjustments, the way someone, somewhere, was trying to make things easier without stepping into her space. It unsettled her, not because it was unwanted, but because it was unfamiliar. Adrian had never been this man before, and that made it harder, because anger was easier to hold on to when the other person remained unchanged. For Adrian, the days became simpler, stripped down, focused. He still went to work, still fought to stabilize what remained of his company. But the urgency had changed. It was no longer about proving himself, no longer about control, just responsibility. He delegated more, listened more, spoke less. People noticed, but no one commented, because the change was not loud. It was quiet, like everything else he was doing now. One evening, he found himself standing outside a small store, staring at the display window longer than necessary. Inside were things he had never paid attention to before. Small clothes, soft colors, fragile sizes. He hesitated before stepping in. The woman behind the counter greeted him warmly, but he barely registered it. His attention was elsewhere, on the smallest details. He did not know what he was looking for, only that he was looking. He chose carefully. Not the most expensive items, not the most impressive, just what felt right, simple, necessary, human. When he left the store, the bag in his hand felt heavier than it should have. Not because of its weight, but because of what it represented. He did not bring it to Isabella, he left it with Margaret. No message, no expectation, just a quiet handover. Margaret looked at the bag, then at him. You understand this does not change anything, she said. Adrian nodded, I know. And she may not accept it, I know. Margaret studied him for a moment longer. And yet you are still here. Adrian's gaze did not waver. I am not here for forgiveness, he said. The words were simple, but they were true. For the first time, completely true. Isabella found the bag later that evening. She did not open it immediately. She knew what it was, who it was from. She sat there for a long time, just looking at it. As if opening it would mean acknowledging something she was not ready to face. Eventually, she did. Inside were small things, clothes, a blanket, a toy, nothing extravagant. Nothing excessive. Just care. Her fingers brushed lightly over the fabric, and for a brief moment, something softened in her expression. But it did not last. She closed the bag gently, set it aside, and exhaled slowly, because gestures, no matter how sincere, could not erase absence. could not rewrite the nights she had spent alone, could not undo the fear, the pain, the silence. Days passed, then weeks. Adrian remained at a distance, consistent, unintrusive, present, but only in ways that did not demand to be seen. And slowly, something began to shift. Not forgiveness, not yet, but something quieter, something more fragile. Recognition. Isabella began to notice the pattern, the restraint, the absence of expectation. He was not asking for anything, not even acknowledgement. And that, more than anything, made it harder to hate him. One afternoon, as she sat by the window with her son resting against her chest, she found herself speaking aloud without meaning to. "He is trying," she murmured softly. Margaret, standing nearby, did not pretend not to hear. "Yes," she said. Isabella's gaze remained on the child in her arms. "He is late," she added. "Yes." A pause, long, quiet. "But he is trying." Margaret said nothing this time, because there was nothing to add. And because they both understood, trying was not the same as being forgiven, but it was, perhaps, the beginning of something else. Morning came slowly, filtered through pale light that softened the edges of everything it touched. Isabella stood by the window, her son cradled gently in her arms, his breathing steady and warm against her chest. The world outside moved as it always did, unaware of the quiet decisions being made within the walls of her home. There was a time when she had imagined this differently. Not the child, never him, but everything else. She had once believed in shared mornings, in whispered conversations and hands that reached for each other without hesitation, in a future that included someone standing beside her, not behind, not ahead, but with her. That version of the future no longer existed, and for the first time, she did not mourn it. There was a quiet strength in that realization, not the kind that came from anger or defiance, but something steadier, something earned. She had survived the nights that nearly broke her, the fear that had lived in her chest with every uncertain heartbeat, the silence, the absence. She had carried life while her own threatened to fail, and she was still here. So was her son. That was enough, more than enough. Margaret watched her from the doorway, recognizing the shift without needing it to be explained. "You have decided," she said softly. Isabella did not turn. "Yes." There was no hesitation, no uncertainty. Margaret stepped closer, her voice gentle. "And him." A pause, not long, but meaningful. "I will not keep him away," Isabella said. "He has the right to know his father." Margaret nodded slowly. "And you?" Isabella's gaze remained on the horizon. "I have the right to move forward." The two truths existed side by side, not in conflict, but not intertwined either. Adrian received the message in the middle of an ordinary afternoon. It came without warning, without preamble. "We need to talk." He stared at the words longer than necessary, something in his chest tightening in a way he could not quite name. He had imagined this moment, prepared for it, in his own way. But now that it was here, he realized there was no preparation that could make it easier. He replied simply, "When?" The answer came quickly. "Today." The cafe was quiet, neutral, a place that belonged to neither of them. Isabella was already there when Adrian arrived. She sat near the window, her posture relaxed but composed, her expression calm in a way that immediately told him something had changed. Not softened, not opened, but settled. He approached slowly, stopping just short of the table. "Thank you for meeting me," he said. She nodded once. "Sit." He did. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence was not hostile, but it was not comfortable either. It simply existed. "I will be direct," Isabella said finally. Adrian inclined his head slightly. "I would expect nothing less." Her gaze met his, steady, clear. "I am not interested in rebuilding what we had." The words landed without hesitation. Adrian felt them, but he did not flinch, because he had already known. Somewhere deep down, he had known. "I understand," he said quietly. And this time, he meant it. Isabella studied him for a moment, as if measuring the truth of that response. Finding no resistance, she continued, "But this is not about the past anymore." A slight shift, not in tone, but in direction. "This is about our son." The word felt different now, not distant, not abstract, real. Adrian straightened slightly, his focus sharpening. "Yes, I will not deny you a place in his life," she said. "But that place will have boundaries. Of course, you do not get to step in and out when it suits you," she continued. "You do not get to make promises you cannot keep. And you do not get to confuse presence with control." Each condition was clear, measured, earned. Adrian listened without interruption, because this was not a negotiation, it was a statement. "And you?" he asked carefully. "Where do I stand with you?" A brief pause, not uncertain, just deliberate. "You do not," she said. There was no cruelty in it, no anger, just truth. "I respect what you are trying to do," she added. "I see it." That alone would have been unimaginable weeks ago, but it was not enough. It does not change what happened, she continued.
And it does not change what I need. And what is that? Adrian asked. Her answer came without hesitation. Distance. The word settled between them. Final, but not destructive, because this time distance was not a punishment, it was a choice. Adrian exhaled slowly, absorbing it. He could have argued. Once, he would have. He would have pushed, challenged, insisted, but that version of him had already cost too much. So, instead, he nodded. You will have it, he said. And for the first time, it was not about control. It was about respect. They spoke longer after that. About practical things, schedules, support, the small, necessary details of a shared responsibility that no longer came with shared intimacy. It was not easy, but it was clear. And clarity, they both realized, was something they had never truly had before. When they stood to leave, there was a brief moment of stillness. Not awkward, not unresolved, just complete. Isabella picked up her bag, her movements unhurried. Thank you, Adrian said. She paused, looking at him. For what? For letting me be part of his life. A flicker of something passed through her expression, not forgiveness, but acknowledgement. He deserves that, she said. Then, after a brief moment, so do you, if you earn it. The condition was quiet, but it was there. And it always would be. She walked away first, not because she was running, but because she no longer needed to stay. Adrian watched her go, something settling in his chest that felt unfamiliar. Not loss, not regret, not even hope, something steadier. Acceptance. He had spent so long believing that love was something you held on to, fought for, won, but standing there now, he understood something different. Some things were not meant to be reclaimed, only respected. In the weeks that followed, life did not transform overnight. There were no dramatic reconciliations, no sudden shifts. Just consistency. Adrian showed up when he said he would. He listened more than he spoke. He learned the small details that mattered, not as a man trying to prove something, but as a father learning how to be present. And Isabella, she moved forward, not alone in the way she once feared, but independently, by choice. She rebuilt her strength day by day, not measured by what she had lost, but by what she had endured, and what she had protected. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in quiet colors, Isabella stood once more by the window, her son resting peacefully in her arms. She did not think about what could have been. She did not look back, because forward, for the first time, felt enough. And somewhere, in a different part of the city, Adrian sat in the quiet of his own space, no longer trying to fill it with noise. He had lost what he once believed mattered most, but in doing so, he had finally learned what it meant to deserve what remained. Not love, not forgiveness, but something harder, something stronger, respect.